What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode. And believe it or not, this is the last episode of season 5. Yes, that is right. It is exactly 5 years to the day, pretty much, since I hit record and put out that very first episode 1. And at the time, we were right in the middle of the first month of the COVID lockdown. So it's pretty crazy stuff, and it's very hard. I find it very hard to believe that a full 5 years has passed since that fateful day. So anyway, we are in the process here of moving on to a new season. And as I like to do every year, every end of every season, I like to go and compile a list of the top 5 episodes in terms of the popularity or the number of downloads. And the idea is just to give you a bit of a summation of the season that we've had. Now, there was about 50 odd episodes uploaded, and I'm going to choose the top 5 for you. And these are the top 5 as in the ones that were most popular. So the first one, and I'm starting with number 5 and working my way up. The first one, number 5, is with Mags Barrett. And Mags is the managing director of Mortgage Navigators. And back in August of last year, August 2024, episode 217 to be precise, I interviewed Mags in my office in East Point. And she came out with this really great, I thought it was one of the most practical pieces of advice for the season. And it was basically the critical importance of getting yourself mortgage ready and the simple 6-month rule that you must follow.
First-time buyer who wants to buy a property, how do they get mortgage ready in terms of, like, what advice would you give? When should they begin the process?
Yeah.
If they want to buy a property, say 6 months from now,
Yeah.
is that a good time?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because the banks look back 6 months.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So it's a 6 months assessment actually. So anything, if there's something wrong in your finances preceding that 6 months, you've time to correct it.
Okay.
I suppose is the thing. And we offer a free assessment call. Our journey is actually free from start to finish with Mortgage Navigators. But the first thing we're looking for, obviously everybody knows the Central Bank of Ireland rules. So it's loan to value 90%. So you can borrow up to 90% of the purchase price. Loan to income for a first-time buyer is 4 times. For a mover, it's 3.5. So everyone knows those, right?
The rules, yeah.
What they don't, or what they sometimes forget, is that you have to prove the mortgage repayment over the previous 6 months to application.
Right.
And not joking, 99% of declines is going to be on that proven repayment ability.
Interesting.
And it's easy to pass
Yeah,
because
you just have to behave yourself for 6 months.
You do. And sometimes there's a little bit of coaching on bank statements. So if by coming to us really early on, we'll review your bank statements over 6 months and we're going to say, look, it's either there or it's not. If it's there, brilliant, we're driving on.
Yeah.
But if it's not there, we're saying, okay, Gavin, you need to stop doing A, B and C and start
cut back
saving.
on your expenses a little bit.
That's it.
For a period,
And look, we still have a lot of landlords, unfortunately, that are taking their rental payments in cash. Fine, no problem. But unfortunately, our customers aren't taking that out of the ATM at the exact same time every month. So that's a huge chunk of their proven repayment ability that we can't see or we can't assess. So it's things like that. There's old rules like no gambling. The answer is yes to that, but like the odd flutter, no problem.
As long as it doesn't go through a direct debit or something.
Well, that it's not very regular. So sometimes we can see B365 or, Bet365 or Paddy Power a lot. And that's the conversation where you're going, okay, that actually needs to stop and come back in 6 months' time.
Take it out of the ATM. And
That's well, interestingly, I had a case not so long ago, and I don't know if you'll be listening to this, but obviously we had a lot of those gambling habits on the statements. And next thing we saw transactions going to his friend on a weekly basis on his Revolut account.
He was borrowing money and stuff.
Well, that's it. Yeah. So look, I suppose, as I say, you're presenting the best version of yourself to the lender. And they do get under the hood, you know what I mean? Like they really do. I mean, they will query anything over €500 that is out, of course. So it's, get it right for 6 months preceding.
And in terms of, a couple of bank accounts, a lot of people have a Revolut as a kind of separate standalone, but they'll go through that kind of thing
They
as
will.
well. And
So any banking that is evident. And as I say, our new Irish, we call them, if we can see money transferring back to the home country, we're looking for that bank statement as well.
Now, another powerful moment that we went into with Margaret, or Mags as she's called, and she revealed some of the hidden traps that can destroy your mortgage application, even if you have a good income.
So some lenders are still stress testing. A lot aren't now, but some lenders are still stress testing by 2%. So that can bring an interest rate nearly up to 6%. So look, the rule of thumb is for every 100,000 you're borrowing, you have to be showing at least €550 in proven repayment ability every month for the last 6 months. But you can get it right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we're good at coaching to get it right. Sometimes our customers can fall off the road to success, but we're good at coaching and keeping them close. After that, it's finding the property, but no one will entertain you. There isn't an auctioneer in the country that will entertain you unless you have
mortgage approval.
Mortgage approval. Yeah.
All right, so finally, I asked Mags why getting a mortgage for an investment property is so much harder than for a home or something like that. And I don't think people realize just how difficult it can be comparatively. And so she has some advice on that and how to avoid some of the big mistakes.
But somebody that's thinking about buying a property for investment purposes, tell us the process there. Is it similar, or because I know it's 30% is the deposit, but what about in terms of the ability to repay? Because obviously the property will generate a rental income. Does that come into it?
Yeah, it's actually solely on, whilst there is a financial assessment or credit assessment done on the borrower, it's actually the property is what the lenders are I suppose, interested in. And it's a tough calculator to pass, right? Okay, so it's a maximum of 70% loan to value, and the rent is scaled back. So you're passing a hard calculator to start with, right? So some lenders are assessing you at 70% of the rental income. Some lenders are assessing at 50% of the rental income.
So you have to be able to pay your mortgage if you're only collecting 50% of the rent.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
Exactly.
Okay. So it's a double. It's 2x basically your interest cover.
And some lenders are stress testing their interest rates, right? Okay, on top of that stress of the monthly rental income. So it's tough. It is absolutely tough. I suppose the banks, back when we talk about the boom bust area, they probably got hit hard with investment properties. They were the first properties that people let go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So they did get burnt. So their lending criteria is definitely stricter on an investment property. So what we're seeing, I suppose, on the ground is that this is now with high rents being attained in the Irish market at the moment. We're seeing that their appetite will want a property in a large town or a large city. They're not interested in an investment property in a rural town. They want to make sure
be easy to move on. Yeah.
Exactly. Their appetite for one-bedroom apartments is low. They'll want at least two bedrooms. It's a better asset, I suppose, to sell if anything.
Easier to shift.
Exactly. But the first assessment to pass is on the rental income, and that, I suppose, the application process is that we are assessing the property and an independent valuer goes out to visit that property and confirm the attainable rent on it. So there's massaging the figures, really, you know what I mean by that. So it needs to be sound. But like as I say to everyone, there could be a time when you will not get 6 months of rental income. So you need to make sure that you have a bank of rent sitting there to service the mortgage repayment. But it is a max of 70%. We probably find it the best application is a 50-60% loan to value, if I have to be honest. And that's a good chunk of money. You know what I mean?
Huge.
Like it's a good chunk of cash. Really, you know what I mean? The other thing that they have very little appetite for, and we're seeing a lot of this at the moment, is that we have young people that are trying to get on the property ladder, on the investment portfolio ladder, that don't have a private dwelling house but are trying to buy an investment property as their first property. Banks have very little interest in that also. They'll want you to have a private dwelling house and that your second property then become an investment property. The good news is that banks are lending. That's the good news.
Yeah, it's a difficult enough thing though, because as I was saying to you just before we started recording, I've heard a lot of people they go for the private dwelling, but the idea is they're just trying to get over that hurdle of having to have so much cash up front. And of course the problem with that is then when the banks go to stress testing you on your next loan, they'll identify that, well, hold on a second, this property is, they'll start,
shortfall in it.
Yeah, exactly. Start picking holes in it.
Yeah, but there is, so ICS mortgages, so their interest rates are quite high at the moment. You know what I mean? You're talking 7.2%. It's not a cheap interest rate, but they have appetite for investment properties if they fit the criteria. Right. So as a portfolio builds, they'll allow you to release equity from an investment property to purchase the next one. Right. So you can pretty much bankroll if you have enough equity. But to start out, you need a very low loan to value so that you're retaining equity.
So you're adding value to the property, creating equity, and then you can pull that out. Exactly. And so that's what we call the B or strategy. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that ICS are doing that all right. The only thing, I suppose, the bit of risk that goes with that is that you're going to have cross-secured properties, and so the security on the first property is tied into the second. Is that not the case?
No. Yes, it is. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I didn't know. Yeah, it is.
If one falls, you could end up with the whole lot falling. Yeah,
absolutely. So, like, what we're starting to see is that we have, maybe an unencumbered property that they're trying to release equity on to buy the next one, and that's risky. You know what I mean? Now, like, because you now have
you own it outright, and now you're tying it into a second property.
Well, you're handing over your title deeds. You know what I mean? Probably for a 30% or a 40% loan to value. So it is risky, to be sure. But it serves a purpose, I suppose, is the other thing.
It depends, I suppose, it's down to the cash flow and the opportunity. Some of the clients that I work with are they're looking at the HMO model, and that seems to be producing quite decent returns in terms of somebody that would be getting 2,000 a month from a property might be able to get 4 or 5, which is obviously great. It's more hands-on, and there's more wear and tear and stuff like that. But at least they're able to. But I've noticed that the property, the valuation of the property still comes in.
It does
at a problem because it's not reflected in their income.
Absolutely, and when a lender is looking at a HMO property, they're not going to look at it as a HMO. They're going to look at it as a unit that can be rented.
Yes,
you know what I mean, like a 5-bedroom property, regardless if it's rented separately or not. So they're going to be cautious on the rental income they're going to generate.
All right, guys, let's get into popularity episode number 4, and this was from last year, and I'm going to turn the clock back to December 2024, and I was responding to a news headline that was in the Irish Times at the time. Now, this is episode number 231. And the newspaper headline that I was responding to was that Irish house prices were now overvalued by 10%. And this is last December.
Irish house prices are overvalued by 10%, says think tank. Now, the think tank that they're referring to is the ESRI, and the ESRI is the Economic Social Research Institute, and it's been around since the 1960s. And what I want to do is just get into the findings of this and to analyze, is it actually true? Because there's a lot of ramifications if it is true, and so I do think this is an important discussion. Could it really be the case that we're already overpriced and that we're all buying away? And certainly having the coaching conversations that I'm having with my clients in the accelerator, a lot of them are of the view it's very, very difficult to find value. And if you're finding it very difficult to find value, well then I guess that kind of points to the market being overvalued. In general, we'll say that if you're looking at, the average person looking at houses for sale in the paper or online, if everything you look at looks overvalued, well then it goes to the point that it must be overvalued if you can't find a deal. Now that's not to say that you won't find a deal every now and then. I know one of my coaching clients, Jonathan, just recently told us that he had bought something online. He'd been on BidX1 and he saw a property that he was interested in. He put his name into the system, registered and everything like that, and he was expecting to have to kind of bid against a couple of other people on this property, and there was no other bidders. And so he secured that property, and in fact he's just closed on it in the last couple of days, and he's going to do well out of that. So it's not on impossible that you'll go out and you'll find a bargain. But what we want to get into is the general sort of property price that's out there now, the prevailing property prices, no matter where you are in the market, are they 10% overvalued or not?
Now, my counter to this idea that the prices are overvalued was that even if house prices were to miraculously drop 10% overnight, that it would not really make much of an impact on the housing crisis in any shape or form.
I don't see a situation here where it becomes easier if house prices were reduced by 10%, let's say. You might sort of say, okay, great, now we're not paying over the odds. But I think the reality is that if the house prices were to drop by 10% next week, or even let's say 20%, is that going to make it easier for you to afford a house? No, I don't think so, because I think the reality is there's 50,000 people out there chasing maybe 1,000 houses for sale. And so the demand is massive. And you have a situation where, okay, let's say if the government just automatically waved a magic wand and said, house prices are now magically 20% lower. That price, that house that you were going to buy for 400 grand, it is now 320 grand by mandate of the government. That's fine. Now, I suppose all of a sudden you've got 10,000 people that can afford 400,000, and now obviously it's even easier to afford 320,000. Do you think those 10,000 people are all going to buy the same property? Like, there's only one property available at that price. You've got a lot of people chasing it. So there's only going to be one survivor in a bidding war. So you're going to have a situation where 10 people bidding on the same property that they can afford because it's now 320. Everyone bidding, prices get bid up to where? To 400 probably. And so this is the thing that I think people are missing when they come up with these points. So the overall impact as well on construction, if there is a kind of passing narrative around the market that prices could crash, that there's a housing bubble here, I don't think it's going to help our decision that we want to have more property built, because developers who went through 2008 are going to suddenly go, whoa, wait, we gotta factor in a possible crash here. So maybe we don't start development. Maybe we try to pre-sell all of these properties to the big funds, because the big funds will guarantee us that we'll get our money at the end of the project. Whereas if we wait till the end of the project and then put them on the market, and the house prices are, just out there and there's people kind of bidding on them based on the market value, then you might suddenly say that's a risk I don't want to run. And so I think I'm just going to try and sell to a housing body, or I'm going to try and sell to a fund.
And in another memorable segment, let's say, I broke down why so many people get trapped by mortgages that they cannot actually afford, and what you must understand before you buy a property.
And if you look into that 10% figure that they've used, like in their conclusion, house prices in Ireland are overvalued by 10%. This means that based on economic fundamentals, property prices are priced higher than what most people can afford. And I think that's a really important thing to drill into there. They are not stating categorically that house prices are 10% overvalued. What they are pointing to is that if you look at it in the European context, then it would look like Irish people are having to go and take out mortgages that they cannot afford, or that comparatively to the European sort of comparisons, you cannot afford. And so I don't know, I haven't drilled into enough detail to know, but if you're taking out a mortgage and it represents 60% of all of your income, every interest payment that you have to make every month, that's a really heavy interest payment and a heavy commitment, considering that these things are usually 20-year mortgage or whatever. Now, obviously, you'll see your pay increase over time, but for 12 months, you'll be paying this rate, and you're just hoping to God that your interest rates are going to fall so that the rate will become more affordable as you go on. Now, I got a message from a direct message from somebody in Instagram in the last couple of days, and they were kind of in a difficult position. I won't give too much detail, but they just sort of say, my situation is I own a couple of investment properties, and then my mortgage was with I think it was the permanent TSB, and it has been moved now to Mars Capital, I think it was. And they were saying that now the new payments that they're having to make equate to $12,000 a month, and that is across all of the properties. But that's the mortgage. Originally, they took out an interest-only mortgage, and now that they're in Mars Capital, it's interest and capital, and it's $12,000 a month. And I was just kind of thinking, how do people end up in this position where they're having to pay that kind of sum? How much are you collecting from the property itself? And I think it was something close to like half that. And I was just thinking, part of the problem here is that people are not educated enough when they're buying. Like if you're buying a property and it's yielding 5%, and you're taking out a mortgage and the mortgage is 5%, you might kind of think to yourself, okay, grand, it's one is washing out the other. Well, it's not exactly, because you don't just pay interest-only mortgages, you pay interest and capital. And so the mortgage interest is only a portion, and then the capital is the other side. So if you're paying 5% and you have a 5% interest mortgage, if you're collecting 5% of rental income, you're not matching one. All you're doing is matching the interest rate. You're not matching the capital payments. And then don't forget, you've also got to pay tax. And so this thing, a lot of people just don't have the financial sophistication to actually do those maths and figure it out. And they think to themselves, well, look, I'll increase the value of the property and this will get me out of trouble. But it'll only get you out of trouble if you sell it. If you're buying it to hold it as an investment, then it's not going to serve you very well. Anyway, the bottom line is, people are buying property in Ireland, and because of the prices that are there, the mortgage that they're taking out are, compared to the European comparisons, they just seem to be stretching themselves. And it's important to point that out.
All right, guys, let's get into number 3 on the list here. And the third most downloaded episode of season 5 was, believe it or not even about real estate investment. And it was about artificial intelligence. And so in episode 211, which was June of last year, June 2024, I did a deep dive into what I believed were the biggest risks and opportunities ahead in the Irish market when it comes to artificial intelligence. Not the Irish market in property terms, but the Irish economy. And so have a listen. I discovered ChatGPT around about Christmas 2022. And I can remember having friends over for Christmas dinner or maybe New Year's, whenever it was. And I remember playing around with ChatGPT 3.5. And it blew my mind. You could ask it to create poetry and all this kind of stuff. And it came out like that. And then it wasn't very long that after that ChatGPT 4 came out. And now I'm currently using ChatGPT 4 Turbo. And it all is happening so fast. But these incremental changes, they don't seem to get recognized by us. The advances, though, are insane. Just 4 years ago, the GPT models that these guys were working on were barely able to string a sentence together. They put the education level at preschool grade kind of level, that it was, say, kind of like a 3-year-old speaking level. And this kind of thing is now able to, quote literature. It's able to write poetry. It is now able to do better in the legal bar exams in America than 99% of all applicants. It is now able to pass all of the university entrance exams with absolute 99 percentile kind of. And so we've come in just 4 years. It has expanded from preschool level education to the level now where it is beating everybody. And that is just going to continue to go at that same pace. And so all of the charts, if you look at these various charts, they point to the growth and just the continuing straight line, almost vertical, of this growth. And the predictions all point to about
2.5 years away, maybe 3 years away, we will have what's termed Artificial General Intelligence, AGI. And the idea of AGI, like, it's great having ChatGPT on your computer and stuff, but AGI will be where you can speak in normal language to your computer or your phone or your device or whatever, and anything you ask it, it can organize and do. So book me a flight to go on holidays with the family, organized. I'd like you to go and do a research paper on such and such a thing, organized. Straight, not to have to kind of work in all of these details with different systems, and all. The whole thing will just simply be like having an assistant sitting beside you, working away, and a very smart assistant at that who can work 24 hours a day. Now, that sounds a bit far-fetched, but this is literally 2027. That is when all of the lines that are on these charts point to. And so AGI, that is what's coming. We're going to have the situation where you just simply, whatever you need from your computer or your phone or whatever, you just simply speak to it and it'll organize that. And it won't be like the crappy Siri that we've had on our phones in the last few years where it, mispronounced words and all that. It's going to understand everything and the context, and it'll know all about your history and everything like that. Once this happens, it is going to fundamentally alter so many industries that it is absolutely hard to imagine. And a lot of those industries are absolutely critical to Ireland's economic development, and specifically like tech companies and data centers. But what's kind of scary is this is actually, we're not talking about a bit of competition here. This is going to turn into an all-out race, because what we're talking about here is massive economic advantages, not to mention, military advantages. This entire thing is going to transform the world. And when you think about that, we're not talking about a little bit of healthy competition between, Apple and Meta or something like that, or Facebook versus LinkedIn. We're talking about a new industrial revolution, and it will be a little bit like the mobilization of the industries prior to World War II.
Now, one thing that I really got sort of stuck into, and this is a strong belief of mine, is that I think Ireland is really well positioned to become, in a sense, the Norway of the AI boom. Norway, for those of you who are aware, has the most incredible oil industry. It's one of the biggest oil exporters in the world. And because of that, the economy over there is just incredibly strong. They have a massive sovereign wealth fund. And I think Ireland is in a position that this new AI could actually provide Ireland with a similar opportunity. And it all depends really on how we act as a nation in the next 3 to 5 years.
And I think that we're looking at the economy over the next couple of years. This is potentially, if we play our cards right, this is like a windfall that could be similar to when the oil economies of the Middle East discovered that they had oil. I mean, you have places like Dubai back in the 1960s or 50s. That was like a fishing village. Look at it today. And that is what these countries are capable of when they get it right. And so those guys, they happen to be sitting on huge volumes of oil, gas, all that. Saudi Arabia, Doha. I spent a year living in Doha. I spent a couple of years living in Dubai. All of those places, remarkable places, but all built off the back of this oil. And we are potentially, as a country, on the cusp of being right in the middle of this data boom that's about to kick off. And so that is a massive advantage. Like, we're talking about 23 billion surplus today. If this kicks off, and if it generates the kind of economic benefits that they're talking about, it could be that we have 30 or 50 billion going into a sovereign wealth fund every year. We could be like the next Norway that has so much money it doesn't know what to do with it. Or, and this is the big or we could fail miserably. We could basically argue and bicker and fight and delay everything and just keep on going around in circles with our planning system and with our protesters and with all of these people out there saying, you can't build this, not in my backyard, I don't want this, I don't want that. It's really, I don't think that these big tech firms are going to sit around and watch us solve our problems while they are facing an existential threat. Anybody who remember, like if you're old enough, you remember there was a company called MySpace. MySpace came out before Facebook. It won the race and it came out before Facebook, but Facebook was better, had better algorithms, whatever it was, and it's gone to history. That's it. It doesn't exist anymore.
And finally, one of the most striking lessons I share was why tech giants are simply not going to wait around for a slow-moving government. History has shown us this time and time again.
A lot of you, if you're old enough, will remember there was a company called Blockbuster. Blockbuster used to have video stores. You used to go in and you used to pick up your VCR cassette and you used to watch a video at home. And then you would bring it back the next day and you had to pay for that. Those video stores were super popular. Here in Ireland, it was referred to as Extravision. And that firm was worth $2 billion when Netflix was formed. And a couple of years later, Reed Hastings, who is the guy that created Netflix, is it Reed Hastings? I'm thinking that. Anyway, he went and he asked Blockbuster to buy them out and he offered it up for $50 million. And the guys in Blockbuster basically laughed him out of the door and said that they were gonna steamroll him. Today, Netflix is worth, I don't know what it's worth, 30 billion or something like that, and Blockbuster went bankrupt. And then you can also talk about Kodak. Kodak was the big camera company back in the day. Ironically, one of their own engineers discovered the digital camera, but they didn't pay any attention to it. And sure enough, they thought that they were in the business of processing film. That's what they thought. They made the film that goes in the camera, the rolls, and you took your photos and then you brought them in and you gave them to produce. That's what Kodak believed their business was, instead of the business of creating images. And so when the digital camera came along, they suddenly went out of business. A company that was worth 124 years old, and that had something like 130,000 people working for it, it went bankrupt. That same year it went bankrupt, Instagram was bought by Facebook for 1.2 billion, and it was 18 months old, and it had 12 people working for it. Just shows you, this kind of stuff moves so quickly that these big firms, they are worried that they will be overlapped like that, and that you could face a situation where these companies suddenly become irrelevant and disappear, and years from now they're gone. You've never even heard of them. So that is the worry that these companies have, and they are simply not going to sit around while we go and figure this stuff out. They are going to move to another economy if they need to. You only have to look at NVIDIA. NVIDIA is the chip maker that makes all of the chips that go into these AI models. It has just passed out Apple and Microsoft and all these other companies. It is now the most valuable company in the world, worth 3 trillion. And it has risen 590,000% in value in the last 5 or 6 years. This gives you an idea of what is ahead of us. And so we really have to think about this and make sure we do not screw it up, and really work hard on getting everything aligned so that these guys do not look abroad and say, you know what, we can do better. We can work with a country that can sort out its problems faster.
All right, we're moving on to number 2 in the popularity stakes. And not surprisingly, it involves taxation. And so, yes, in episode 208 from May of 2024, I brought tax expert Brendan Allen onto the show. And one of the first things he warned us was never to take advice from that Facebook group that you're a member of.
I enjoy doing. The thing is this, taxation is not straightforward and you need to know the ins and outs. And while it's nice for me to speak with yourself, but it's important that people talk to their accountant, to somebody who understands the issues. One of the concerns I have, I I'm a member of a number of Facebook groups, and I would ask your members of your various groups, do not take advice from Facebook. If you're investing 200,000 plus or whatever, maybe for a property with somebody who thinks, or, oh, I think it is, that is not good enough. Being a property, you've got to reduce the risks. And that's the name of the game.
Yeah.
So Facebook is not an answer to talking to your accountant.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And like a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing because it gives you a sense of confidence that may be misplaced.
Yes.
And I've had that before, especially in the area of VAT around property, because that's an area.
Yes. Yeah, well, I love that, to be quite honest with you. And the reason why I love it is because it keeps me in business. And I regularly thank the Minister for Finance for keeping it as confusing and as difficult as it is. And I get quite a number of referrals from solicitors who are in a situation where one of their clients is buying a property and what's the VAT thing, and you've got to do your pre-contract inquiries. So it can get very complex, particularly if it's a mixed development, you know.
Yeah, well, I know I've had a couple of run-ins with the tax side of things before, and it's very confusing because the length of the lease and all of that kind of stuff, and depending on the use of the, in fact, I think it's best that we don't even go there because it's so confusing that it'll only make matters worse for a lot of people, other than to say, if you're buying a property and there's any question of there being potentially a VAT exposure, then go straight to your accountant and make sure that the accountant himself actually knows enough about it.
Indeed.
Because the accountants often need to go to a specialist themselves.
Exactly.
Now, another memorable moment, as far as I'm concerned, is we talked about VAT, and a lot of people are not aware of VAT and property. And this is where things can go really badly wrong. And so even like a really good deal that you have found, if you're not careful, VAT can totally derail your deal.
One thing that comes up quite regularly for landlords is where they would buy a property and it's of mixed use. Say it's a commercial downstairs and upstairs they're doing it's residential. So what they're trying to do is convert the whole lot to residential. Now, the issue there is it's materially altered use. VAT applies, particularly if you're selling the property. So you can get yourself into a whole pile of mess without understanding what you're at. So talk to your accountant or your tax advisor.
And we get into the area of HMO investing with Brendan. And what's interesting about this is that a property portfolio is taxed a certain way. But if you go about it in the right way, if you structure things correctly, you can turn your property portfolio into a trading business and save massive amounts of tax. Have a listen.
You've got to ask yourself then, what are we doing? Are we renting or are we operating under a license? So, for example, there is a major trend now to go for HMOs.
Yes.
Right? So if you think of a HMO, so you're effectively letting out on a room-by-room basis. Now, there are issues possibly with VAT, because once you get over the VAT threshold, what you're looking at there is this. The VAT threshold is 40,000. If your income is over that amount, you are VATable at 13.5%, and it's actually built into your figure.
All right, we have arrived at number 1, the most downloaded episode of the year of season 5. Does anyone have any guesses what the topic was? Well, I think Brendan Allen hinted at it there in the last segment, and yeah, that is correct. Part 1 of my series on HMO investing. It came out in July of last year, July 2024. It's episode 213. And incidentally, part 2 came out in September, but it didn't get as many views. So if you're interested in If you heard this one, if you want to listen to it, 213, don't forget to listen to 222 as well.
Now, this is good for the tenant's rights in a sense, because the tenant only has to worry about paying the bill on his specific room. He doesn't have to worry about the other people. If somebody's not paying the bill, nothing to do with me. I'm just looking after myself. But it's also good for the landlord, because on a split basis, you actually earn more. So if you go out there and have a look in the area that you live at the prices of, we'll say, a house, a 4-bedroom house, what does it rent for on a monthly basis? If you go and take that very same house and split it into 5 bedrooms, each bedroom collecting its own rent, you will get more for that individual bedroom. If you take the 5 bedrooms and add up the price that you get for each one, it'll be substantially more than you'd get for the house as a whole. And in my case, I know a couple of guys in the program, in the mastermind, they are doing this, and you'd be amazed the difference. Like, instead of collecting, say, 1,800 a month from a family for a 3-bed, that landlord may be able to get 800 per room, and so he'd be able to collect maybe 2,400. But what people will also do is extend the house out the rear and things like that. And so guys that have, we'll say, a little bit of construction knowledge and stuff, they can go and do this, and the downstairs living room gets converted into a bedroom as well. You'll go and put in an ensuite down there, and then maybe you'll extend out a little bit into the rear garden as well. So instead of having, we'll say, a 3-bed, all of a sudden you might have a 5 or a 6-bed. And a 5 or a 6-bed collecting 800 a month, suddenly, do the maths, like it's an awful lot more. And so you could be bringing in 3,200 a month instead of the 1,800 you were getting for just the house on its own. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. Like, the guys that are extending out the rear, and they're going out there and they're finding contractors, and the contractors are trying to, we'll say a contractor has won a job as a subcontractor for, say, a big project out in Leixlip or something, working on maybe the Intel development. And those contractors are desperate to bring in workers from, say, the Eastern Europe that have skills, but they just cannot find accommodation for them. And so suddenly they're putting them into a house, and you're looking at contractors paying, 4, 5, 6,000 a month for a house and taking on all the bills and stuff like that. So it's very, very valuable way of going about it. And it's also potentially helping us sort the housing crisis, because you've got a house that can now accommodate 5 or 6 people instead of it just being a small family. Now, of course, families need houses too, so this isn't going to work across the board.
Now, the next tip I want to share from that episode on HMOs is on potential future regulation of the sector and how to protect yourself.
Those regulations that we're talking about there, about the UK and the difference and stuff like that, what's happened before, if you go back to, I think it was 1987, and it was around about the time that I was starting to look at studying architecture and stuff. And that was when they did away with what was called the bylaws, and they introduced the Irish planning regulations. And the planning regulations, it was the first time they did it back in 1987. And they brought in these things, and rather than write, hundreds of pages of regulations, what they simply did was take the UK regulations and just put a harp on the front, like bang, that's it. That's the Irish regulations. And so it was essentially the British or the UK regulations, and just brought in and dusted off and turned into the Irish regulations with almost no changes at all. Now, over time then, they would have updated the regulations, and they would have made, they would have noted certain things that they don't like, and they would have made changes. And so over time, this evolved and changed and stuff like that. And nowadays, they might be very, very different to the way they were once. But that is how it was done back in the day. And so the likelihood is, if they do decide to come in with regulations around HMOs and stuff, probably the UK market is the nearest market that they're probably going to go to take those regulations and to use them as some sort of a template. And so have a think about that.
Finally, I share a cautionary story from my own experience. highlighting just how dangerous it can be in the case of overcrowding. And you've really got to be very, very careful. Have a listen.
And I can remember, if I go back to the 1990s or early 2000s, I remember I had this lady working for me, this Chinese lady. She was a housekeeper. She used to come in and she also helped with the kids and things like that. And I can remember she asked me, could she rent my apartment that I had? And I was delighted to help her because she was working for us and she was looking after the kids and stuff. So I gave her this property and I gave her at a very good rate. I think I was maybe charging her $600 a month or $500 a month. And it was for a nice apartment in the centre of Dublin. And I can remember popping in to collect the rent one time and finding that there was about 6 people sleeping in this 1-bedroom apartment. And I can remember just kind of thinking, oh my God, what is going on here? And they had turned this into a business, and they were paying me $500, but for all I know, they were getting $500 a month from all 6 of these guys, and they were, big money being made. And we talked about the wear and tear, and I can remember going over to the cooker, and there was this huge big pot of rice being boiled. And the hood, the hood that sits over the cooker, that just wasn't able to cope with the amount of steam and smoke coming off it. And I can remember putting my hand up above the press, and there was a thick layer of vegetable oil fat. It was kind of like maybe an inch thick. And I can remember thinking to myself, like, if there was a spark and this was to catch fire, like...
All right, so guys, that is the top 5, and I will mention one more. There was one that was incredibly close. It was like pretty much joint 5th, and so it's going to make onto the list in the form of an honourable mention. And so episode 220 from September 2024 last year, and this was an episode that was in fact a free training that I gave, and it's called the Real Estate Roadmap. And a powerful idea is how stepping outside your comfort zone is the real secret to success in most things in life, but certainly when it comes to investing.
It's only when you actually take action that this stuff becomes skill. So, theory is one thing, skill is what you get when you've actually taken action on the theory. So anyway, those of you who take action, a lot of the time, the reason that you don't take action is because the comfort zone. And one of the things that I've found over the years is that I'll take action where I feel comfortable, but I will procrastinate and I won't take action where I don't feel quite so comfortable. What you will probably find, and if you do a self-examination, you might discover this about yourself, is that I'll often see that somebody, they're very comfortable, say, a tradesperson. They're very comfortable going into a house and doing refurbishment work, like taking down walls and replacing bathrooms and kitchens and things like that. That is within their comfort zone because they're familiar with it. They do this on a regular basis. But ask that very same person to stand up on a stage and to do a presentation, and they'll go white with fear at the idea. My God, I can't believe I couldn't stand the idea of doing that. And so they'll never step out into that part, and because that is outside of the comfort zone. And this is something that can hold a lot of us back. We'll do what we like, the bit that we like, but we won't do all of the stuff that's required. And so if there's anything I would suggest, I'd say just try to push yourself out of your comfort zone if you want to actually take action on these things. If I tell you, for example, that you need to build your profile online, and you need to start networking, you need to start going to events and networking with people, that perhaps is an area that you don't feel quite so comfortable. And so that's the bit that you'll delay. So you might go out and buy a property, or you're ready to buy a property, but you wonder why your career is not progressing to the next level. And often it's because you're not willing to take that little bit of comfort that requires you to step out of your comfort zone.
Now, during that episode, I went into quite a bit of detail into the crash that after 2008, just the property prices, the collapse and everything like that, my life was thrown into total disarray. Now, I go into quite a bit of detail. I won't do that here. But one thing I want to share is that despite all of those hard decisions and all of that sort of struggle that I went through, I explain in this clip why I still believe property investing is one of the best wealth building strategies still available to you today. Have a listen.
And I think if you are getting into property, you really do need to accept that it is not always going to go according to plan. Like, it does not go in a linear way. Even if you look at historical charts, you'll see that there's ups and downs. Now, it usually goes up, but sometimes it'll go above the mean level, and then it'll fall back down below. And so we call it regression to the mean. And there are good days and there are bad days, as I said. Business, and particularly investing, I believe, is about 80% psychology and about 20% strategy. And so the reason I say that is just because despite the roller coaster that I endured and all of the pain and anxiety and suffering and stuff, I'm still here. Like, I'm still a property investor. And why do I believe that you should build a property portfolio? Why invest in property? Well, because I recognize it is still a key component to building wealth. If you want to build or create wealth, you only have so many avenues to achieving it. You can get a really high-paying job, I guess, but for most people, a job really just covers the bills. It's not going to ever be a source of accumulating a lot of wealth. You can also go about starting a business. Like, people are natural entrepreneurs and salespeople and stuff, and they'll go and start a business, and that can be a way to create wealth. And certainly it's a good avenue to do it if you have those skills. But it's important to acknowledge that 65 to 70% of businesses fail within the first 10 years. And the issue is also down to people just trading their time for money. And that is, tradespeople, contractors, all of those people out there that have a skill that they basically trade that skill for money. And so you're always going to be busy trying to pull in the money. But if you're not careful, you'll just be busy trading time for money, and you won't actually build those passive income assets that are essential to you becoming the owner and not the worker.
And so that final clip there, that serves as an excellent segue into some very significant changes that I have made to my own accelerator training program. We have a brand new platform that we're now operating from. I've just created a brand new curriculum, and I'm introducing all these new modules, and I'm introducing a 6-week workshop called Dealcraft. And all of this included with this is new membership tiers, so that I have a couple of options for people with different price points. And so if any of this sounds of interest, if you've been sitting on the fence thinking about doing this, the price has been incrementally going up in the last couple of years, as inflation and all that. But there is available now a price that is actually going back, and it's slightly less. And so look, if any of that is of interest to you, please do reach out. I'll put a link in the show notes before, if you want to connect with me. So guys, that was season 5, and I hope you found it interesting, valuable, and I'm really looking forward to welcoming you to season 6 next week. Do let me know if you have any ideas or topics that you'd like me to cover in season 6. And I will see you in the next episode. Take care.